Well, good afternoon. It's the now afternoon after the night before of the US election. This is another Ask Atticus podcast. My name is Leon Cook. I'm the founder partner of Atticus, and I'm joined today by Paul and Peter, who are both senior counsel to us here at Atticus. And gents, a short, sharp um, uh, report on what has happened last night and were we expecting it? So before we came onto this, we just said, is this a surprise? Peter, I'll start with you. Were you expecting this result? And actually, I was looking at the numbers for swing states of Pennsylvania, 150,000, Wisconsin, 30,000, Michigan, 95,000. I could go on. It wasn't actually close. It wasn't
No, it
one
wasn't
here
close.
or
And what
there.
America,
It was a domination.
You're right. I mean, America needed a decisive victory, whoever it was, because those teams of lawyers that are always ready to pounce from both sides if there's any discrepancy or it's very close. Well, America didn't need that. They've got a decisive Trump victory. And I think it comes down to two things that a lot of commentators, especially here in the UK, really didn't particularly focus on. One was the price of groceries. If you look at places like Pennsylvania, a lot of people struggling to feed their kids because of huge inflation there. And whilst GDP is something that people do think about to some degree, what they really think about and how they vote is about their own personal inflation and how food inflation has been a big issue in this. Also, immigration. And there was a wishing away of this issue. There was a wishing that Kamala Harris, from the majority of commentators and pundits and politicians as well in the United Kingdom, that she would win. But the fact is, she was a terrible candidate. She couldn't communicate. And you can say what you like about Donald Trump. You can love him or loathe him, but he can communicate and he does connect. And that is those three things, I would say, are probably the reasons why he won.
Yeah, I think the cost of living was definitely a point of similarity of what we saw in the US election as what we had in our summer. But just to take things back to our side of the shores, Paul, I mean, Labour and its senior leadership, David Lammy being a case in point, have said a lot of interesting things about Donald Trump in the course of the last few years. Do you think this is going to, they did have a dinner in the run up to the election, but do you think it's going to create any sort of a stumbling block whatsoever vis-a-vis the special relationship?
Can I say, first of all, I think that the lesson that the Labour Party should take from this election is don't ignore white working class men, which I think is what the Democrats did. If you didn't like Joe Biden, appointing his deputy isn't really an endorsement. And what she had in common with the people that Peter talked about who were suffering from the cost of living, it was difficult to fathom. So it wasn't a surprise. I would suggest, in terms of David Lammy's position, if anything, if there was any suggestion that he was going to be moved soon, I think that's gone away. There is utterly no way that Keir Starmer can be seen to move a foreign secretary because of the election of President Trump. I think they will have made some kind of peace. They'll have been diplomatic when they met. The real question is, does this mean to keep David Lammy? Is the Labour Party more subdued in its in any criticism it might feel of Trump? Although, to be honest, I don't think that would have come whoever was the Foreign Secretary. So if I was David Lammy, I wouldn't worry about a Trump victory. I would suggest it makes him more difficult to move.
Well, I think it was interesting that Mark Rutte, Emmanuel Macron, and Starmer were in a race to make sure that they got their congratulations in first. Very early this morning, before, I mean, there are still four states left to declare, but they'd obviously understood where the winds of change politically were taking them. Just to keep it in relation to UK and Labour, I mean, Trump has said that he is going to slap 60% tariffs on China, 20% across the board for everyone, including us. Do you think on the back of the budget here that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer will be retaliatory, or they will try to foster some sort of different arrangement, God forbid, even reopen the idea of a free trade agreement at a federal level with the United States?
They can't afford to be retaliatory in any way. I think it's really up to Trump whether we can talk about a trade agreement, and he doesn't seem particularly that keen. And I really think, to be honest, if he does go ahead with these tariffs on China and on Europe, it's a much broader problem for the world economy than just what happens to the UK. And I would suggest the UK and indeed Europe is not going to be a good place to be if he goes through with it.
I mean, that's an interesting point. Peter, what do you think about? So Labour have this interesting decision to make. Can they look both ways? Do they now look across the pond and try and form some sort of a deeper relationship with the United States post Brexit, whereas in the run up to the election here in the UK, they had basically talked about a closer alignment with Europe? Or do they actually understand that our closest neighbours are still our trading, well, despite the United States being our largest trading partner, I might add? How do they bridge or sit on both of these horses, if that's at all possible?
Well, it is possible. I think you can have bespoke arrangements with both. I think in regard to trade wars, and Trump has said trade wars are good. I can't see it happening in the way that he will wants it to happen. I can't see Congress allowing him to do that in the way that he says he will. It'll be interesting. Maybe it'll happen, but I also think it would be very bad for the United States. I think it would be very bad for the relations with big international diplomacy problems would emerge, as well as the fact that economically it would be, I think, disastrous, and it'll bleed into all sorts of other relations as well. I just can't see it happening in the way that he says it will happen. And I think that a lot of the things he said he would do between 2016 and 2020, he didn't, because they were not politically possible. And whilst Trump is a fantastic campaigner in many ways, he is in some ways, despite having been president for 4 years, a little bit politically naive in terms of what is possible. So I will watch with interest in terms of what happens. Maybe I'll be completely wrong, but I just don't see those plans particularly as being practical or realistic.
I
I
think
think
it's
it's a very interesting point. Sorry, can I just say, Peter, I think it's a very interesting point that you raise when you say that Congress won't let him. Because Congress is, of course, dominated by the Republicans. Yet the thing this time is Trump can't do another term. This is him finished.
Mhm.
And it will be interesting to see what his last term, he's certainly not finished. But with the Republicans in charge of Senate and the House of Representatives, will the Republican tradition try and reassert itself and kind of get the party back from Trump or not? I just think very interesting thing to observe over the next 4 years.
You're
I think
absolutely right, Paul, and I think that Trump is obviously a unique individual, but whether Trumpism will actually survive his final period of office as president, there doesn't seem to be a natural successor within that, and he's never really had all of the Republican Party per se behind him. He's been a character that they have almost had a sort of transactional relationship with, so it'll be interesting to see how that relationship works, continues, evolves over the next few years, especially when it comes to things that may not, in many Republicans' minds anyway, be in America's interest, especially now they have both the Senate and the House.
I think it's true to say that what Trump campaigns on, he doesn't necessarily institute in policy, but I do believe that his trade war with China is something that he intends absolutely to do. In fact, Trumponomics, he sees this as effectively a line item of which he can help the working class across the United States. How that actually translates to goods in the store, especially if that's coming in from China, I don't think that's been necessarily explained in this election. But if we take it to another part of the world, Ukraine, where he said in the run up to the campaign, day one, I'm going to cut a deal and this will be over. Obviously, he doesn't take the oath until the 20th of January. But do you believe that? Obviously, we here at Atticus are very happy and are very proud of our work to be in association with Ukraine. But I think obviously there's a little bit of time between then and now, our inauguration. But what do you expect to see on Ukraine? And I'll start with you, Paul, because obviously the United Kingdom has taken successively across prime ministers a very leading role in this enterprise.
I think it'll be extremely difficult for him to go ahead with that. I mean, that would be a fracturing of the Western alliance, even if it didn't officially fracture NATO. So I suspect he will be forced to find a way around that because European leaders have made it clear, if necessary, they will go alone in their support of Ukraine. I don't think that's how he will want to start off his presidency. And I think you might be right again that it's one of the things that what he says in campaign doesn't actually turn into policy.
Do you agree with that, Peter?
Yes, I do, and I think that the real fears that so many people have about proximity to Putin, to relations with people like Elon Musk and so on, will all play into that, and it'll be the art of what is politically possible. I think if Ukraine could have been solved easily, it would have been solved by now, and I think that will bleed into many other international disputes such as Israel-Palestine, for example, where Trump thinks there is a clear and quick solution when history and indeed the present tells us that that is not the case.
I mean, the Abraham Accords are one of the things he was most proud of as a legacy item from his first
Oh,
presidency.
if it hadn't been Donald Trump, if any other president had created the Abraham Accords, they would have given that person the Nobel Peace Prize.
And well, I'm sure he might start to reiterate that line item. He'll probably take the role on himself as be press secretary. But let's just take it back into another area of policy, energy. So COP is literally just around the corner. Phraseology like drill baby drill has been uttered by the Donald. So, net zero. Ed Miliband here in the UK might be thinking, right, scratching his head, who's going to be my counterpart on the other side, and how are we going to effectively make sure that 1.5 or whatever a designated target is for global emissions, how are we going to make that happen? Peter, one for you on this one. Do you think that copper for the next 4 years is something that people should bother even turning up to in the light of what Mr. Trump has said previously?
Well, if you don't have the United States and if you don't have China and India signed up to things like net zero, it's a very reasonable question to say, what is the point? And here in the United Kingdom, there are many people say we should be a beacon. We should certainly try to lead by example, and we have cut our carbon emissions to a huge degree. But if you are changing the very nature of your economy, if you are changing how you live, how you travel, how you drive around, well, that is something that is a big adjustment and will continue to be a big adjustment. And the government, the Starmer administration, is putting a load of time, money, and effort and political capital into it. That's fine. But if you're completely out of step with your closest ally in that regard, and also other countries that you want to trade with and influence, like China and India, well, then I think that could become a greater problem, especially when the public in the United Kingdom may well say, why are we making all these changes? Why are we increasing costs in some of those areas when actually our, much bigger polluters aren't doing even nearly the same thing?
I don't want to be too parochial, but there was a poll this week that showed of all the nations of Europe, Trump was most popular in Scotland than anywhere else. And in this one, he might well be, because a number of people, and indeed trade unions, who might be supportive of Trump, who are arguing with Ed Miliband for a just transition and to keep the oil and gas in the North Sea flowing while we prepare for the future. So I think if he takes a lead in that, there will certainly be some people, certainly in the northeast of Scotland and within trade unions and energy companies, who will be glad if it's an influence and slows down Ed a little, or at least makes him take the idea of a transition, a slower transition, seriously.
Whether that will revert in an award of 20 concession agreements that were previously put in the drawer, I'm not entirely sure. But I guess if anyone can make it happen, it probably is President Trump. Last couple of points. In addition to being the first day or post an election, it was also the first day in office for Prime Minister's questions for Kemi Badenoch today in the House. I think there was a very clear line of argument. She was basically trying to skewer Starmer on Lammy, the relationship of Labour with Trump and a Trump presidency. Do you think there's going to be, that is a clear line of argument that they're going to continue to propagate over weeks, months, and years ahead, that they have a relationship with the United States? This is probably a relationship that they are best to furnish, although there is a certain individual called Nigel Farage who might have something to say about that. Peter, bearing in mind your former responsibilities, I'll ask you to answer that first.
I think Kemi Badenoch will return to this, but it can't be the only thing she says, certainly. It was very timely, and she made some good points in that regard. I think she had a reasonable first PMQs. I think she can probably be better. The fact is that if Donald Trump didn't want to meet David Lammy, he wouldn't have met him. They had dinner. Clearly, no matter what you think about Donald Trump, he can occasionally let bygones be bygones. He did that with David Lammy previously. I think that Kemi Badenoch will certainly want to be very not necessarily pro-Trump per se, but pro the special relationship. And there's a little battle really between the two of them to show whether she or Starmer can be more in that regard. Although certainly, given the many international conferences and times when Starmer will meet Trump, well then he will have to be very pragmatic in his relations with him, as will David Lammy.
Paul, what did you make of it? Have we seen the future laid out before us over for the next couple of years?
I think the first Conservative Party leader of this Parliament, but perhaps not the last. I think she really just wanted to get through today rather than anything else. The relationship, the quotes from Lammy and the relationship with Trump was just one of the things that she tried to go on. I think she got through unscathed. She's still alive. I think it would take a few, let's give it a few weeks before she gets her style. She doesn't yet really have a policy offer. She doesn't really have a position quite yet. But she was competent, even if what she accused the Prime Minister of, she did seem to be reading her script rather a lot.
You've also got to remember that perhaps the best performer from the opposition at Prime Minister's questions of the last, or my political lifetime anyway, was William Hague, and made absolutely no difference whatsoever at the 2001 election.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, people in the bubble, Westminster, get very excited by this stuff, but people outside of it, if it's not on the 6 o'clock news, then they're not going to be or reading about it. Right, final closing point. I think, Paul, you mentioned one in terms of don't neglect the white working class male, but if there is one other takeaway for you both from this US election that could be applied to politics or electioneering anywhere, certainly in these hours, what would it be? Paul, start with you.
But I think what was very interesting was just how targeted Trump was. He didn't really care about what the mainstream media was saying. His use of podcasts and him just there was a fantastic attack ad that he had about Kamala Harris's position on trans rights, which just finished. She's for they them, I'm for you. And it was just he targeted remorselessly people who feel that they've been left behind, who, as Peter said earlier, felt most affected by the cost of living rises. And I think that different way of campaigning. I mean, the Democrats last night were crowing about the fact they had 60,000 volunteers out who'd made 3 million contacts on polling day. A lot of good it did them. That good old-fashioned way we used to think was how elections are won. It's not how they're won now.
Paul's absolutely right, and I think the sands are shifting in terms of electoral campaigning. It's so much about it if it is digital. I mean, Donald Trump was the first American candidate for president, I think, certainly that I can remember, who didn't do an interview with 60 Minutes on CBS. He did 3 hours with Joe Rogan, and that was an incredibly successful thing for him. But also the candidate himself, he connects in many, many ways, and people are reacting to politicians, experiencing politics, thinking about politics in very, very different ways. And that can't be measured by traditional ways. It can't be measured by traditional punditry or polling. Look at how many people were wrong over the last few weeks and months, and just remember that. I think the next time we've seen people wrong on Brexit, we've seen people who've been wrong on lots of things to do with British politics. It's happened with American politics too as well. I think the sands are shifting, and we need to react to that and be realistic about what can be predicted and what can't.
Yeah, I mean, anyone that puts full stock in polls these days, I don't know what they're drinking, but I think you've surmised the events of last evening very, very well. I would not be surprised. Interesting that Farage did turn up the day before. The good people of Clacton obviously getting the great representation that they deserve. And if he was to be appointed the American ambassador to the United Kingdom, crazier things might have happened. I think I've heard that rumor. But on that note, we discussed the global events of the day here at Atticus on our Ask Atticus podcast. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Opinion, for joining us. And we will let's see how this envelops over the course of the next week. But we'll be writing up. And if we can help you understand either what's happening across the pond or on this side of the pond, please get in touch. But for now, thank you both.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.